generated.
It's interesting to hear that Google is cool with the AI assisted content as long as it's proofread and by a human. I think that's really important to understand, because a lot of people have the ideology of like, yep, if I just get really good at my inputs and just another input and another really good input to change it, and then just they get like 10 to 15 different inputs to create this, and they have the ideology that like that can fly under the radar and be seen by other AI tools that it's generated by a human. You put it on and it still can be incorrect. Like the facts can be incorrect, and the data can be not as valuable, and people are seeing it as an answer. So I'm so glad that Google and probably these other search engines are like, yeah, it can be used as a tool. It's kind of like when you hire a content writer, you're using them as a tool, but you still need to proofread it and edit the content anyway, right? Yeah. So I don't see it as it being the answer like most people do. What's your take on that?
Someone who's generating that content, as in you're a site owner and you just generate that content and you slap it on the website and you think it's going to rank and it's going to be all good. Obviously, if you're not proofreading it, or if you're just using it as a cheap labor, so to speak, then you, I think, make the same risk as you're risking when you're using very cheap content, human content writers. Okay, their quality might not be that great. If Google update comes, you might be penalized or devalued for having bad content, and just it's a straight up risk. Okay, you might cut your costs at the moment, but in the long term, it might come back and bite you on the back. So that's obviously not a good idea, right? Now, from the writer's perspective, on the other hand, I would say that I wish I was a writer at this moment, honestly, man, because I would use the hell out of it as my writing assistant. Okay, and let's say, for example, you're writing content for your own website, and it's obviously about buying businesses, and you have a question, you want to answer a question in that content. Why would you want to buy business? Okay, so of course you can add your own experience and your own thoughts onto that, but the baseline is pretty much the same, right? As an investment or as something. And I don't see anything against AI taking this heavy lifting off of you and writing that little intro, or at least the what you call it, the blueprint of the content for you. Okay, you just go in, check it over, add your own experience, add your own thoughts, and then you probably have like a bit longer piece that is really valuable for the users. And I think everything boils down to that, and what Google is saying also relates to just that.
I love that. Either way, and I was actually created a bit of a process, was it yesterday? It might have been the day before, with a client it was yesterday, on using different tools, AI tools for detection and creation, and explaining to him that what some of these AI content generating tools are really good, why they're really good, is because it prevents writer's block. And you can take some ideologies, and then it generates inspiration on what you want to write about, and to go deeper on those topics with more context and humanize it a lot better and give a far more valuable answer than just, it's great to buy a business because you'll get 20 to 30% ROI.
Exactly.
That's a really good topic for inspiration to write about, right? And that's why I'm bullish on the tools in that aspect. It can prevent decision fatigue and writer's block in that aspect. But there's still so many things that around the tools that we need to be careful of, right? I believe that's some of the good parts of AI. I don't know. Do you have any other myths or ideologies that you want to talk about, the dangers and the warning signs, before we move on to more things that you think it's good for?
Yeah, maybe very briefly, two things. So all these AI content detectors, they're not foolproof. Okay, so what I'm doing, I have my favorite one, which is called GPT-0, and it's my favorite because so far in my tests, it detects the best out of all of the other tools that I've tested, and I've tested like 12 or 13 of them, like basically everything that pops up in Google for AI content detectors. I'm testing it, right? If there's a new kid on the block, I'm testing it, because obviously you want to see what these tools are capable of. And surprisingly, even though OpenAI themselves released, what do they call it? They call it classifier, I think, not a detector. That is meant to detect AI or GPT generated content. But even that tool isn't always detecting the AI generated tool, or it's saying that your human written content that you just literally wrote yourself is AI generated. So they're giving false positives.
Yeah, that's crazy.
In my opinion,
there's that. Also, there's the conflict of interest there as well. Is that if your own AI generation tool has an AI detector, there can be that conflict of interest that people need to consider.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think they were pressurized by universities and educators because these folks are really colloquially speaking, shitting their pants, thinking what the students are going to come up with, right? And I mean,
yeah, of course.
Kids are probably even more creative than we are. So I'm not surprised. And in fact, the favorite tool that I mentioned, GPT-0, that is built. I think it has some really strong scientific background, and it's actually built by a guy who is at the university or he's affiliated with the university, or he built it for the university. But it's kind of like an answer to this problem of AI generated content being able to, so universities being able to detect AI generated content. And so far, it's like honestly the best. Although I'm doing like 3 to 4 different tools before I actually conclude whether or not this content is AI generated. And I think until a really great tool, one that is almost always correct, isn't going to be released, then we're going to have to stick with using a couple tools, really.
And I guess those tools that are good now will hopefully earn more money and do some more R&D and just make those tools better and better and better as well. Because we're very much, like, as much as people, like, I just keep thinking that people have the belief that it's just the answer, it's the way forward, and it's a great tool on the belt. But we're also still pretty young in it. Like, where we're going to be at 3 years' time with it, it's going to be a very different story. So are there any other things that people should be worried about before we talk about how good these can be used and how to use them in a good way?
Yeah, just to conclude that, I would say that the truth, I think, undisputed so far, and I think it will not be disputed, is that these tools are here to stay. Okay, so if anyone hasn't tested any of them, it's the time, right? Embrace them or stay behind, because they're not going anywhere. Like, that's for sure. They're too helpful, too useful in certain things. Obviously, all these things that we mentioned are worrying, but I think this is more of something that you should be aware of and adjust your use to the specifics of the tool that you're using. And I think it's like with a hammer. You can have a hammer go around bashing things and destroying things, or you can have a hammer and make a great sculpture, right? It depends what you're using the tool for, and you have to adjust to what you're using it for. So yeah, the last thing, like I said, just consider what you need to use this tool for.
There's so many benefits. I've mentioned one around it, and you've mentioned something else as well. But yeah, it's a benefit that can prevent writer's block and generate inspiration on content. How do we embrace this in the way that we are understanding how to use the AI as a tool to generate content and have it be human supervised content? And how do we do this in a way that is going to be unique on the search engines and going to be valuable for our users, so it gets ranked?